My name is Lois Shannon, and I am the founder of an organization called the Women's Network. And I guess the way I ended up here was that I actually felt like I had really abandoned myself as a woman. I went very heavily down the masculine path of being in corporate America and having big business roles. And then I had children fairly late. I had 3 very quickly, and realized that I was a woman and a mother, and went into a whole process of reclaiming myself as a woman and what that meant. And I had a calling to set up an organization that was something like AA for women, that it was about recovering our womanhood, our femininity. And so the Women's Network is intended to be a resource and a platform for that, for us to come together as women and share all of this amazing information and teachings that's kind of bubbling up through so many of us. And super excited to be on today with Patty Ashley to talk about your work. And you've been aligned with the feminine and the work that you've been doing for so much longer than me. And so I'm really excited to explore the things that you've learned along the way. And maybe you could just give a quick intro to who you are and how you got into this work, and then we'll delve into Mary Magdalen.
Okay, thanks, Lois, and thank you for this opportunity, because it's been great to connect with you and see what you're doing for women. It's so important and so aligned with my passion and my heart. So I'm very grateful for you. So my journey started when I had my first child at the age of 21, just a young woman myself, and having a lot of questions about what it means to be a mom, and actually being way too young to be a mom. And so I started this search for the best parenting practices, and I just couldn't get enough. Ended up getting a master's in early childhood and learning all about, being a mom, and worked with moms, then had 3 more children. And was really immersed in the whole mothering experience. And I was doing a support group for moms back in the 80s. And back then, that was when women had been rejoining the workplace and getting back out, into work, and feeling kind of isolated, women who wanted to stay home. And so there was this whole question about being a mom, same question we have today, only it was, on the tails of the beginning of the feminist movement. So people were trying to figure out how to, have a self, be a mom, work, not work. Anyway, so I got fully immersed in mothering groups and support groups for women as mothers. And then I ended up being a parent educator for a pediatric group for 5 years. And so the stories I would hear were the same stories over and over and over. I don't feel good enough. I'm inadequate. I can't do it like the other mother. I can't ask for parenting help because that means I must be doing something wrong. Wow. And it just seemed to be this theme that went on and on and on. So when I started my doctoral work, I decided to make that my dissertation topic on being good enough. And so I interviewed some women, and I found that none of them really felt good enough. And I thought, well, here's this theme again. So we're talking about something else. We're talking about some really deep unconscious pieces of self.
Yeah.
That are keeping us blocked from living fully and being vital and alive. So I like Jungian psychology. I'm not a full-on Jungian, but I got into the idea of the shadow. And the shadow is the unconscious pieces that have kind of been repressed, and we don't really notice because they're in the dark. That's why he calls it the shadow. So I thought, well, there's some pieces in our shadow that are creating this experience of not being good enough. So that started my search for Mary Magdalen. I know that seems like I'm not even talking about Mary Magdalen, but that's how I dived into it. I started, like, The Mist of Avalon, Marion Zimmer Bradley's book came out in the 90s, 80s or 90s. And I was like, that's interesting. Here we're talking about the women in the, King Arthur story that had been just kind of written out for all these years. And so the idea of reclaiming this feminine, the priestesses on the Isle of Avalon. And then the Da Vinci Code comes out. And I'm not much of a fiction reader. I have too much attention deficit disorder to pay attention that long and read something from cover to cover. So I went out and got all the nonfiction books on these topics and really immersed myself in the Mary Magdalene, the myth of, or the story about the fact that if in fact Jesus had a wife, why do we not talk about that for 2,000 years? You know, what's the big mystery? What's that about? So it seemed to me that was my big aha. And we've cut off this piece of history in a really important story. I mean, we have Christmas and we have Easter, and you know, I'm not a religious person at this point. I was raised Catholic, but no longer participate Catholic. So when I talk about the Magdalene archetype, I'm not talking about religion. I'm talking about a story that's been told,
right,
that we've lived. And to me, the question then is, well, how does that affect us as women in terms of what have we cut off? So I kind of got more into the content instead of myself, but that's how I got into being really interested in Mary Magdalene. So now my children are grown. I have 4 beautiful young adults between the ages of 25 and 35, and I have 2 grandbabies that are 4 and 3.
Oh my gosh. And remind me, how boys or girls, your kids? What are they?
I have 2 boys and 2 girls, and I have 1 grandson and 1 granddaughter.
Wow.
Yeah.
Balanced masculine and feminine. At the total balance of the masculine and feminine. That's so beautiful.
I was really lucky because I really wanted my son to have a brother, so we went for number 4. It's always a gamble.
Yeah.
And he got his brother, and I'm really glad. They each have brother and a sister, at least one of each.
And I just want to throw one other thing before we launch into the content, because I think it's relevant that you were also a single mom for a lot of that time, right? And you went back to school. You did so much, Patty, as a single mother. And I think it's important to call that out, because I have so much respect for women that do all the things that you've done on your own, because we've just talked about balance, but when you don't have a partner, that's a lot that you did by yourself. So,
well, thanks for acknowledging that, Lois. I've always been the kind of person that, well, not always, but when I started doing my inner work in my 30s, I got to a point where I thought I have to live an authentic life. And in order to do that, I have to be true to myself. And if that means not being in a marriage that isn't working for me and going against all odds financially and just emotionally, because I knew it was what I needed to do, I just kind of did it. And it was hard. And, and I didn't even realize back then, I got divorced in the 90s, and there still is, but there was a lot of stigma around single moms, and I didn't even realize it, because I was like, people think, oh, you're a single mother. Oh, I'm like, yeah. And, and I don't really need a man in my life to be complete. And I'm in relationship with a man right now. So it's not that I, don't want men in my life. It's just that I don't need a relationship, to be whole. And that was hard for people to get too. They thought, you're leaving your marriage for another man. I said, no, I'm leaving my marriage for me.
Yeah. Which is a really huge statement. It's one of the reasons why I wanted to bring it up, is that I think you were very true to yourself as you were going through this process. I think it has to do with us finding ourselves, is really understanding what we need, what makes us feel fulfilled. Like all of that is part of the process.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much for acknowledging that, because I just kind of, you kind of, when I look back, how did I do it? I don't know. You just kind of, and
I think we don't know. Well, this is so off topic, but there apparently when the Congress and Senate went back into session yesterday after the huge storm, the only people that showed up were the women.
I heard that. I did.
So I think there is something in us that we just do it. We get on with it.
Yeah.
But let's just, I do want to make sure we jump into the content and that we stay on, because we're going to try and keep it to about 30 minutes.
Well,
so
I didn't mention that I am right now practicing as a psychotherapist and a parent coach in Boulder. So that was kind of about me. The conclusion.
I think it's really important. And I think it's so beautiful when someone like yourself, where you've been in circles with mothers, and you've done all the things that you've done, and you've written a book, and you're a psychotherapist. You've seen a lot too. I think that's the important thing, is you've heard a lot of stories, and so this is not just you. I mean, you see the trends and you see what's happening out there. So what exactly is the Mary Magdalene archetype?
Yeah.
Because I don't think people understand maybe what that is.
Well, like I was saying earlier, it's not about religion, and to me, it's not about gender either. When we talk about masculine and feminine, people quickly connect to man, woman, and I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the inner experience of our inner feminine and masculine qualities. So Carl Jung talked a lot about that. He called it the anima and the animus, that inside everybody there's two different energies, male and female energies. The male energies are your practical, pragmatic, external, take care of things, logical. The feminine are the internal, intuitive, juicy, creative, nurturing, compassionate qualities. And so we all need both in order to be whole. And so the archetype of Mary Magdalene, to me, is the story about having cut off these feminine parts of self. So we've got Jesus in the story, and he's the man with all the male disciples, and he's bumbling along and he's doing all this stuff as a teacher, but yet Mary Magdalene is cut out. So what they've found is they've recently, not too long ago, just found some lost scrolls and scriptures and pieces of information that people are still kind of all assimilating and pulling it together. But for me, what I've learned is the teachings of Mary Magdalene were very much about love, unconditional love and compassion, and that Jesus was here to restore that. He came because we were living in a dominator culture, which we have continued to live in even since death. But prior to that, we left the egalitarian goddess cultures where, goddesses were honored, the feminine was honored, the earth was honored, the cycles of life were honored, and people worked together. And so we had our male and female energies that created this wholeness. And then fear takes over, and all of our force and power and control becomes the dominant way of being on our planet. And so that's what we've been living under for like 2,500 plus years of, this patriarchal power and control based on fear. So Jesus, I believe in what I've read, he came to say, hey, wait a minute, we've left out all this lost feminine stuff. And Mary Magdalene was right there doing it with them. What better way to teach about the feminine than to have a woman, teach about the feminine. And we took his story and we wrote about his story because we were living in that patriarchal model. So it just continued on up until now. And, when we had the feminist movement in the 1970s, a lot happened for women then. However, what I feel the unfortunate part is that women were trying to have a sense of power in the patriarchal model. So it was, if I'm going to feel good about myself, then I better be like a man, because men have the power. So I'm going to go to work. I'm going to have, a life outside of the home. I'm going to choose to do the things I want to do, which women ought to have the right to do. However, we left out this really important piece of homemaking and tending the hearth and, cooking and cleaning and nurturing babies, and so much of the feminine is still lost, I think. And we're in this time now where women are trying to do it all, they say, but they can't really do it all. But how do we do it? And then, how do we juggle? And it's really challenging. I watch my daughters, who are working moms, they're exhausted. They're exhausted.
Yeah. And well, that was going to lead to my next question, which is, why do you think this is so relevant to us today? To bring up the Mary Magdalene archetype and the lost feminine. Why is that important?
Because I think if you look at what's happening on our planet, with global warming and with the poison, the oceans are just, full of plastic and trash, and there's toxins in the environment, and and we're all exhausted and depleted, and the, increase in cancer and just people, the planet and ourselves, all in many ways, we're not well.
Yeah. Well, you're a psychologist. I mean, I'm sure you see it with families and kids, and
We're not giving ourselves
levels of stress are out of control.
we're not giving ourselves that love that we need and that compassion because we're so busy trying to keep up with everything and have everything and do everything and be successful. And so the whole piece of stepping back and going, wow, how do I connect to this feminine part of myself that's all about unconditional love and compassion and nurturing and caring for people and taking care mostly of ourselves. I mean, I think that's what happens is we neglect ourselves. And, we can't take care of anybody else if we don't take care of ourselves. The oxygen mask on the airplane analogy is a perfect one. You can't help a small child until you put your own oxygen mask on first. And I work with a lot of moms, and they have a hard time with that because they say, of course I would put the oxygen mask on my child first. And so we give and give and give until we've just pretty much given out. We're pretty depleted, I think.
Yeah. I think it loops all the way back around to something that you said at the very beginning when you were introducing the work, that because we hold this belief that we're not good enough, that we're not enough, you've heard that so many times, you said, that it drives us to keep giving and doing and in an effort to be enough. And it's an endless cycle. We never get there. And I think we're just starting to wake up to the fact that that doesn't actually serve anyone. It doesn't serve us, and it doesn't serve our families, but it's been a dynamic that we've been living with for a long time.
Absolutely. It's a whole epidemic of not enoughness, It's like, I'm not enough. I'm not enough. And the truth is we are enough, and how do we live? I mean, we've learned so much about human emotions in our lifetime, even, prior to the 1950s. It was all taken from biblical texts that were misinterpreted. The spare the rod, spoil the child, do as I say, not as I do. Break the will of the child was a belief system, that has gone on, and it's still kind of that's in the shadow material. And so we learn how to really be who we are. I had
This is beautiful. Sorry, keep going.
one of the moms I'm working with, a newer client yesterday came in and said, this anxiety, I just have so much anxiety. And I said, well, we're working with that. We're starting with breathing, taking some deep breaths. And, we're going to uncover some belief systems that you learned growing up that influence, some of that anxiety. Well, what are they? What are they? And I said, I don't know. Talk to me. Tell me something. Tell me something that your mom has said or experienced. And she goes, well, I know my mom said to me when I was telling her I had all this anxiety that I need to get over myself. I said, okay, well, what does that mean to you when you hear that? Well, that I have to take care of my kids and it's not about me. And so what does that mean to you? If it were me, I said, it would mean that my feelings aren't important, that my feelings aren't valid.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the old school and how it still is happening today.
Oh, yeah.
Get over yourself, stop, don't be a crybaby, But when we acknowledge our feelings, that's the feminine. It's like when we're in that authentic experience, all feelings are okay.
Yeah.
It's part of the human experience.
I know. I think so many of us were told, especially if we were going to go out and work, that we had to just override all of our needs, override our emotions, show up and be just like the men. And I think what we're learning is that when we work with our cycles and understand when we're most creative, because our moon cycles actually have a lot to do with how our bodies operate, and it's very different from a man.
Right.
And so when we work with that energy, we know when to take it slow or when to be more creative and I think that's going to be fascinating if we can really remember that and own that. Because the stress, I think, comes from overriding our needs. And as you say, not respecting our emotions, not respecting our feelings. And we got it from our mothers. Our mothers didn't know it, and their mothers didn't know it. And so it's been handed down from the mothers to the daughters, which I find really fascinating.
Right.
It's not the men that are keeping us in the patriarchy. It's us.
It is, which is why, for me right now, I feel it's important to teach men about the sacred feminine and the sacred masculine, because we need the strong male energy to hold the feminine. And again, it's an internal experience. Everybody has both qualities. However, whether you're in a heterosexual or a homosexual relationship, one person tends to have more of one or the other, and they balance each other out.
Right.
So men coming forth and honoring and valuing the feminine and being able to hold it, in a way that the strong male energy holds is really important.
Yeah. And the good news is that we are animals and we do balance ourselves out. So when I sometimes start feeling stressed about this, I go, you know what? It's all going to correct itself, because we have a tendency to do that. And I know when I was really on my masculine, my husband became very feminine, because our kids needed to have the nurturing and the feminine presence. So the beautiful thing is that we do balance, as a culture and as an individual, and we find our way back to balance.
Right. And that's a really good point, again, because it isn't about gender, and it is really about the balance of those two energies and how they play out in ourselves and in our relationships. And
so I'm just going to make a little note, Patty, that somebody did put on here, what about Hillary Clinton for president? And I think that's actually a balancing thing, that this would be an amazing time for us to have a female president, right? Just to make that point that we do need to balance things out. So thank you for the comment. I think, nothing is a coincidence. So at this time, when we're all feeling this call to really raise awareness for the feminine, it would be so appropriate to have a woman president.
Or a male who embodies the feminine. Yeah.
Or a male who embodies the feminine.
And maybe one of each, male and female. Politics right now just really talk about the lost feminine. Look at let's not get into politics.
I was going to say, let's not go there. But one of the things that I did want to ask you is, how has the sacred feminine been lost? And where do you think we're going to find her?
Yeah, where is she? Well, she's in all of us, you look at nature and you look at the springtime, and love the little buds in the trees, every year there's a cycle of life, death, life, things die and things are reborn, things die and things are reborn. So it's still in us. It's in us. It's just, Margaret Starbird, one of my favorite authors, she's written a lot of books. She's a huge scholar that influenced the Da Vinci Code. One of her chapters is called "The Desert Shall Bloom," and she talks.
Oh, beautiful.
And T.S. Eliot's poem "The Wasteland." How everything dies when we lose the feminine, and if we look at our planet and we look at how it's dying, in a lot of ways. When we restore the feminine, which we all have it, it's not like it's gone. I mean, it's an infinite supply of abundant supply of compassion and nurturing and unconditional love. We just have to allow it. Bigger than the fear. It's the fear that kills it. It says, I'm going to have, X amount of things in order to survive. So I'm going to cut down all the trees in order to get that, because it's fear. I got to have it in order to survive, versus if I really love myself and everybody else and we all work together, there's more than enough to go around. And if we take care of our planet, it'll survive. But if we're in fear and we're killing everything, we're not really in touch with the lost feminine. So she's there. She's in all of us, and I think that's the cause of a lot of women's depression. I mean, I saw news this week that now they're going to require everyone to have depression screenings. Women who are pregnant have depression screenings, which I think is great, as long as they're not, also requiring pharmaceuticals to go with it.
Yeah, exactly.
Acknowledgement of that.
It's such a beautiful point, Patty, about nature. Mm-hmm. I think, with all the technology that we have and everyone going and working in office buildings, and I feel so fortunate to live in Boulder, and it's a very outdoor community. But I think about places, cities and so on, where people are not in nature. I think the more disconnected we get from nature, the more disconnected we are from the feminine. I think nature is a really beautiful way of calling us back to
Absolutely.
the feminine nature, because we remember the cycles, and we remember the abundance and the unconditional love, and that everything we need is here. We don't, as you say, the problem is, as we become more feminine and embrace more our unconditional love and acceptance, we're not good consumers.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have to buy as much, right? And so it kind of goes against capitalism and consumerism.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so Mother Earth, that is our mother, and
That is our ultimate mother.
you watch a tree, or you watch flowers, or you watch nature, and it has its own mindfulness, right? And timing. And I love what you're doing with mindfulness, because I think that's a big piece of connecting to the feminine is being really quiet and paying attention. So when I look at a tree, like I'm looking at the trees out my window, you don't see them like growing, like in fast forward motion, if you would do that with a film, and speed it up. You don't see it, but it's happening. It's happening in its time and its rhythm. And that's the feminine. It all has its own time.
It all has its own time. And I've taken this practice of talking to the trees and really wanting to be a tree and feeling like the trees. And it's true, like in the winter, they don't have any problem being vulnerable and losing all their leaves and waiting for the new growth. And just like pregnancy, we can't force things. We live in a society where everything is on a schedule. And yes, we need structure. And that's why we need masculine and feminine, because the masculine provides the container and the structure, and otherwise we would be in chaos. But when we become too rigid with the structure, it doesn't allow the emergence and things to be born when they're supposed to, because if we force a baby, it doesn't work.
Right.
And I think that more and more these businesses and things that women are coming up with, it's like, how do we allow things to unfold and emerge in their own time? Because if we're forcing everything and controlling everything, it can put things out of whack, which is where we are.
And when you mentioned that the tree doesn't mind the winter, I think that touches on a really important point, I think, of the fear of the feminine. Because, truly the cycles of life, death, life that happen, even in a cycle of a day, when the sun rises and the sun sets, we go into darkness and we have light, and we have darkness, we have winter and we have summer, and we go through these cycles of dying and darkness, and that's very feminine, and that's something we really fear. I mean, we're all afraid of, I can't say we all, but most people are afraid of dying and death and ending. We want to hold on to everything so tightly that, we get so attached and in the fear that we're not really in the flow of the natural cycles of life, death, life. And I think a lot of the fear of the feminine came from that. It's like, we're going to die. So in order to survive, we need to do all this to be strong and powerful and big. And the truth is, we have to let die what needs to die. Yeah. And that's really scary for people.
We need to be reborn.
Yeah.
Otherwise, and I think the other thing about the feminine is we deal with the unknown. Not needing to control everything and know everything. And that's been a big learning for me, is to let go of knowing.
It's hard. It's hard to be in the mystery. I've learned it's the hardest lesson in life, is to be in the unknown.
Yeah.
And that's the feminine. That's the womb. The babies are born in this dark unknown. They don't know what's going to happen. For 9 months, they live in that.
It's beautiful. It's so necessary. It's where creativity comes from. So I'm just conscious of the time, and I'm wondering if there would be any little, I don't know, nugget of wisdom or a little exercise or anything that you would be able to share as a takeaway relating to the Mary Magdalene archetype, or ways that people could begin the process of kind of identifying the feminine, because we talked about, where did it go and how do we find it? Mm-hmm. Any little last parting thoughts that you would have for people as they go on this journey of discovery?
Well, like I was saying with my new client, and how we're uncovering belief systems, I believe you start with the breath, You start with breathing in, because we live so much today in a state of trauma. All the stress actually to our body feels like we're in trauma. And so whenever we're in trauma, we don't get enough oxygen to the brain, and we are not really thinking as clearly. So it seems so simple, but to start with a deep belly breaths and be really in that place of breathing in. And then if you have a mantra, even I am enough, I am enough, I am enough. But the thing is, people have a hard time even saying it because they don't believe it. So the practice is to try and embody it. I mean, we're in our heads a lot these days. We're very intellectualizing everything, but really our bodies have all these memories, and we wanna kind of soak it in like a sponge. Like, I am enough, I'm enough, I'm enough. Fake it till you make it, and that's the start. I mean, I really believe that it's a process of excavating, which is why I love what I do, and I love the opportunity of being able to witness women and men in the process of excavating these lost pieces. But the takeaway would be the breath, and mantra such as I am enough.
Beautiful. Well, that's a great way to end it, because that's kind of where we started, that was something that you saw with so many women. And I think we do have to just keep saying it, even if it doesn't feel real. And what's beautiful is to notice when it starts feeling more real to us. Yeah, like really track ourselves in that process of embodying and really believing that. So
I'm a big fan of journaling and writing about that stuff. I noticed that I'm really resistant to why I'm enough. I'm feeling it in my belly, or I'm feeling my throat close up, and so that's that mindfulness. That's paying attention. And then, like you're right, when you start to feel it, go, oh, interesting, I could actually feel that. And then there's the process of deepening and deepening and deepening. So it's a lifelong, or lifetimes, really, of work.
Exactly.
In the moment, of taking a breath.
Exactly. All right. Well, we are going to have some of your content on the website too. So if people want more, and you also have your book.
So I do want to say, starting next Thursday, I was going to start last night, but conflict came up. But next Thursday night, from 7 to 9:30 in my Boulder office, I'm doing a 4-week series on reclaiming the sacred feminine and sacred masculine in everyday life. So, and we're planning a trip to France, which probably isn't going to happen in May like we hoped, but at some point will happen, to go to the sacred site. So we'll talk a little bit about what's involved in that in the class. So,
oh, that's great. I know. I want to go on that trip so badly. So if it's moving to a different time, that's great, because I really want to go.
It is. We've got other people too who are interested in a different time. We just don't know when it is yet. So.
Okay. Well, see, that's so beautiful and feminine. We're waiting for that to unfold, when the right time is for that trip.
Exactly.
We don't need to control it. Yeah. All right. Well, listen, Patty, thank you so much for sharing with us today. And we look forward to, as I said, having more of your content available on the Women's Network, and having people find your content and engage with it further. So,
well, thank you so much, Lois. I love what you're doing.
All right. Big hugs. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.